Welcome to this video on how to perform a Mann-Whitney U test, which is the non-parametric equivalent of the two-independent t-test in SPSS. So we now have a different data set. So it's called Video M-Whitney Wilcoxon. This is because for this test we need our data to be non-parametric, so to not be normally distributed. And we can check that. So we would go to descriptive statistics, we would go to explore, and then we would put in data. For example, we can use gender here in our factor list, and let's say we're interested in video A. It's a bit difficult to see, but sometimes when you hover you can see the actual name, and then we'll just double check that we've got everything. So histogram, normality plots, yeah, okay. So again, we've got our descriptive statistics, and now we've got our test for normality. And you can see that both of the tests are showing they are significantly different from that of a normal distribution, which is quite telling considering we've only got 20 samples, and it's quite difficult to see any normal distribution patterns here as well. And even the Q plots don't look fantastic. So we will leave that to one side. So in order to perform your Mann-Whitney U test, you go down here to non-parametric tests, and I find it easier to go to the legacy dialogues. These are some of the older versions of SPSS, and go here to two independent samples, because it's the two independent sample t-test equivalent that you're trying to do, but it's just that your data are not normally distributed, so you can't do the t-test as you would normally. So if again we were to look at video A, and again, it can be quite difficult when things are labelled in a similar way. So this is another lesson in how to label your variables. So this here is A, and if I hover, I can see that that's A. So I'm going to put that into my test variable, and I'm going to look at the effects of gender. Now you might remember that previously we had to define groups. It's the same here. Now one thing you'll notice is that it's not all neatly written out as all ones and all twos, and it really doesn't matter what order it goes in SPSS, because SPSS will just know by the code. So you may encounter data sets at some point that are a bit like this. You don't have to worry. It's just important that you know what the groups are, and again we have 1 and we have 2. Could just have easily have been a 0 and a 1. We've got the Mann-Whitney U option here ticked. That's exactly what we want. Now, because we have a small sample size, which some would deem to be anything less than about 60 odd, we're going to make sure that we tick the exact box. And as it sounds, this is more exact. It's less important when you have large samples, and in fact it can take a lot longer to perform if you have the exact value ticked on a large sample size, but in theory you shouldn't need it as much if you've got a larger sample size. So then we would click continue and then press OK. So once again we have our summary, we have our mean ranks here, we have the number of samples that are included in each group, and then we have our table of results here. So this here, our Mann-Whitney U, is our test statistic of 41. Now there are a lot of different p-values here. So some of these are corrected for ties, as here shows you here, and some are not. So B, for example, is not corrected for ties. So this may depend on your lecturers and what they would like you to use. So because we had a small sample size, we should use an exact value. It's also better that we use something that's two-tailed. As you might remember from previous videos, that means it's testing in both directions. Was male higher or lower than female, not just was male higher, for example. So you might be using this p-value or possibly this p-value. Double check with your lecturers, but the main thing is that they are actually quite similar, and often they will be, and they're both showing that there really is no significant difference between the scores that both male and females got when it comes to video A. So in very simple terms, that's how you perform a Mann-Whitney U test in SPSS.